All right, so welcome to part 2 here of taking this wheel that we just put a new tire on, and we're moving over here to our balancing machine. Before we get started though, we need to pop off any of these old wheel weights to make sure that, we start with a clean surface. I'm also going to simple green down this whole inside of this wheel and make sure we don't have any of this dust, because these internal sticky weights that we're going to use need to stick onto something clean. If you put a sticker on a dirty surface, it just pulls the dirt off and they're going to fly off. And these weights, kind of the whole point of this machine over here, is to get rid of that issue if any of you have ever experienced it where you're driving 35 miles an hour and then you start to feel a vibration, maybe in your steering wheel. That's because your wheels are out of balance, kind of like a top that's had an extra weight put on the side or a hole drilled to the side of it. It's not balanced. So if your tire's doing that, it may be fine at 30 miles an hour. At 35, you get a vibration, and then at 40 or 45, it starts to smooth out. And that variation can be at kind of any speed, but these weights are going to perfectly balance this wheel so that we don't get any vibration at any speed. We can also do some other things with this machine, like check the roundness of a wheel, check the roundness of a tire, and I'll run you through how to do that too once we get this tire cleaned up and ready to go onto the machine. Be back in a sec. We're going to have to repeat those steps until this towel comes out clean. All right, so now I've got the inside of this wheel cleaned up enough. We'll double check it again before we stick the weights on. But we need to start thinking about mounting this thing to the machine. And on the side, we've got a couple of these centering cones. As you notice, there's kind of a taper to them. And we need to figure out which one of these cones will slip into the center bore of our wheel, but still stick out the back. So this one's a little bit large. We're going to go one down smaller and see if that one fits any better. All right, so actually I had to go down 2 sizes, but as we can see, if I put this in the back side of my wheel, there's still a little bit of that surface sticking out the back, and that's what I need, because that's going to center this wheel on this spindle when we go to mount it onto the machine. So I'm going to set the camera down and we'll get this thing on there. All right, so on that spindle, I'm going to put this cone on here first, and then we'll slide the wheel on with the kind of inside of the hub on that cone, the same we kind of tested from the back side of the wheel. And then we're going to twist this kind of giant wing nut onto the end here. Nothing. Onto the end here, and we'll spin that on, and that's going to lock that wheel in place. This little back piece here is spring loaded, so as I tighten up the wheel, you'll see that extra little bit that we had on the back side of the cone that was sticking out of the wheel. This will actually push in so that the inside hub is sitting flush on this flat steel piece. And this makes sure that the wheel is perfectly straight up and down so that as the machine takes its measurements, we know it's accurate. Another little trick is there's a foot pedal down here that if I double tap, it'll spin that spool for me and tighten up the wheel. So I'm also going to take this foot pedal and press down on it and then give that an extra little push to make sure that this thing is not coming off. Now we're ready to start balancing. So from this side, you can see I've got that wing nut on here. It's nice and tight, and the back side of my wheel is sitting flush on that metal plate. That little bit that was sticking out of that cone has pushed back in on that little spring part. Let me come up here to the screen. Now, one of the things you'll notice is we're trying to balance this wheel, right? So we go to balance. And nothing happens. This is not a touch screen. And no matter how many times you push on this, nothing is going to happen. These 4 buttons down here correspond with K1, 2, 3, and 4. And then this middle button here will jump you between these menus. This screen kind of tells us everything we need to know about this wheel and kind of what we need to do. These are the areas where it's going to tell us how much weight we need to add. Here's kind of a simulation of the machine and the wheel and that drum that I'm going to show you here in a second. We've got the measurements of our wheel, and right now it thinks we're going to do these clip-on weights that are kind of like this, that hook onto the outside of the wheel. On most modern vehicles, unless it's a steel wheel with a hubcap, I don't like using these. They can dig into a wheel and kind of cause corrosion, a whole bunch of other issues. So we're going to use these stick-on weights. That way it doesn't damage the wheel, and they, just kind of a cleaner look in general. So we'll have to change that in a second. But over here, this lets us know that the machine doesn't know how big this wheel is. And it needs to know that in order to tell us where to place the weights to make it balance. And then over here, we can see, our vibration. Is it a static vibration? Is it bouncing up and down? Or this machine will actually do what's called a dynamic balance, which will make sure it's not only good this way, but also good this way. This bit down here tells us our road force. And road force is how much pushback that wheel gets when it spins. So if we have a lot of road force, that's going to cause a vibration. From a tire not being round or a wheel not being round. And the way this machine measures it is with this big drum. And this big drum is going to spin and push down on this tire using that airbag back there, kind of like a big truck. So that airbag is going to inflate, push a pivot up that way, which pushes this giant arm onto the surface of the wheel. And then it's going to measure that pushback, and it's also going to seat the B to make sure that the tire is in that groove on the wheel exactly where it's supposed to be. First thing we need to do on here, though, is tell it that, yes, we are using passenger tires. So as a passenger vehicle, I can spin this wheel. If it's a light truck tire, if I just want to spin it, I don't want to use road force, but we're going to do road force, passenger tire. And this tells us our limit is 26 pounds of road force. We also need to tell it what kind of weights we were using. So if I come down here to K4, which is all the way on the right, that's the picture of our stick-on weights, our clip-on weights over there, and then also these like internal weights that we're not going to use. So K4, now we're going to arrow over to, we got clip-on, 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 sticky, sticky, sticky. So we're going to K3 over to sticky, sticky, and then say OK. Now we need to plug in our measurements. To measure, we're going to use this arm that's right here on the side. And if you noticed, or you will notice, let me clear this out. There we go. I'm going to pull this arm out, and the machine is going to know I'm ready to take measurements. And then we're going to do exactly what this thing says. I'm going to take this arm, and I'm going to put it right on the inside lip of that wheel where my first weight is going to sit. So I bring this down in here, and I swing the arm out until it touches the wheel, and that's about where I'm going to place my weight. So I've got that foot pedal down here, so I'm going to press that foot pedal, and when I do, I get my first measurement. And then it tells me to put this arm where my second weight's going to go. So again, further in on that wheel, kind of right, as far out as we can go. I'm going to press that foot pedal again, just once. Just kind of tap that foot pedal. And now it says align spoke location. So this machine will actually try and hide the weights back behind the spokes of the wheel so you can't see them. Well, this is a pretty spindly wheel, and I don't really care about hiding the weights. I'd rather use as few weights as possible. And it's also measured this wheel. And so now we know it's a 17-inch wheel, and the width between them, it's in millimeters. It's a 8.5-inch wheel. We will go ahead and put this arm back into its home position. Otherwise, the machine won't move forward. And now we have our measurements, and we're ready to go. So the next step is going to be to inflate our tires to the inflation pressure that the manufacturer recommends. So right now this machine is set to 24 psi for some reason. So I'm going to use this scroll wheel on the side to bring those pressures up to the 32 psi. We'll go with that. I didn't look up the spec for this car, but I run these tires a little lower anyways. So we're going to set this to 32 psi, and I'm going to take the tire gauge or the tire chuck here and put that right on the valve. That'll lock in, and now we can see our measurement, we're low. And this is set to that auto set pressure. So it's going to do a short push and then inflate the tire to whatever we told it to be at. You know, the short push, you'll see how much it changes. And then that second push of air is going to be a longer one to try and get it to that target. Now, let's say you just come off of that machine over there and your pressures are at like 40 PSI. Well, this machine will also remove air if you put it on and it's too high. So it's trying to drop it down to 22. We don't want to do that. We want to go back up to 32, and it's going to reinflate for us. The other thing that's important when you're done with this step, it's going to go green. There we go. So you're going to pop this off of here, and everything has to go back into its place. If you look down here, there's a little trigger to let the machine know that this is back in its home, and the screen will automatically kick back to the next step screen once that goes back into its place. But also, more importantly, if this isn't back in its holder and this isn't fully back in its location, the machine won't go on to its next step, which is to actually measure and balance the wheel. I think we're ready to go here. We haven't done our spin up yet, so we don't know how much weight to add, but we do know where our weights are going to go, what type of weights we're using, and we're set up for passenger tires. So we can go ahead and drop this cover and press our start button to start our balance. Now, the first thing it's going to do is that road force. So I'll put the camera down underneath, and we're going to see that big drum kick forward and start pressing on that tire as it seats the beads and measures the roundness of everything. And then once that's done, that drum's going to kick back up and off of the tire, and then the tire's going to spin up super fast to simulate driving on the road, and then it's going to measure any vibration, again, this way or that way. So a dynamic balance. So I'll press start, and we'll get going. Yes, I did that already. If anything ever gets wonky, you can always step on that pedal and it'll stop the machine. See what we've got. So we need 1 ounce of weight, so that's 4 of these at that exact spot on the wheel, and 2 1/4 ounce on the outside of the wheel, and we've got 14 pounds of road force. So we're well under that 16 pounds. Another kind of cool thing that we can do with this machine, if we don't like our weights, or we don't like they're too high, if it says like I need 4 ounces or something like that, or maybe it says we've got a road force issue, we can actually come down here and we can measure the wheel to see if it's round. So measure rim runout. So let's go ahead and do that on these wheels real quick, just because it's been a while since I've done it, and let's check to make sure these wheels are actually round. So I'm going to hit K3 for measure rim runout, and it tells me to grab this arm here and this arm here to bring it down and hold it onto this lip, and then press this button here on that arm. See, there's that button on that arm. With this particular wheel, though, we don't have a lip for this to sit on, so we're going to bring this down here to start the spin, press that button, let it go, while still holding this one here on that inner lip of the wheel. You don't want to measure here because that part gets dented just from curbing or whatever. So we're going to go down here to actually measure the actual roundness of this wheel. So be patient with me for a second because I'm trying to fumble through this to get it started. There we go. So I'm going to hold this into position and let it spin. I don't feel it pulling on my hand or anything. I feel like this is pretty straight. So there we go. So now we have a lateral rim run out. So that's this way. We have 4/1000ths of an inch, which is really nothing. And then radial run out, which is this way, kind of egg-shaped, we have 3/1000ths. We can go to show details as well. And this is where we can look at our radial harmonics. So a first radial harmonic would mean there's like a bump. Your wheel is egg-shaped. A second harmonic, so it means there's like, first harmonic means there's like one weird spot. A second harmonic would be if it's kind of oblong, there's two bumps on it. And then a third order harmonic is going to be your wheel is kind of triangle shaped. It's super jacked up. So we can actually plot those too if we want to. And we can see a graphic representation of kind of how even our wheel is. And we can spin the wheel too, and it'll tell us kind of what part of the wheel has that bump or has that oscillation. But this wheel's fine. If there was an issue, we'd get kind of a warning message on there. So we'll go back to our main screen and go to put some weights on this thing. Actually, one more thing before we get on to the actual balancing. So this is another feature of this machine, which is called force matching, where it tells me that we measured the wheel, right? So we measured to see where the high spot or low spot of the wheel would be. And when we did our road force, we measured the high spot and low spot of our tire. And force matching, we can take the low spot of our wheel and put it where the high spot of our tire is, and then we can reduce the road force from this entire package. So if we rotated this thing around, well, whatever that is, 60, 70 degrees or so, about 130 degrees or so, around to here, so that we match this part of the wheel. If I press start, this part of my tire up top here, I'll press start again, and you'll see it's going to rotate. There we go. To that part of my wheel, we'd mark those and then rotate them to match. And then that would bring my road force down from 14 to 7. 14's not bad anyway, so I'm not really going to lose any sleep over that. I'm just going to go ahead and throw some weights on it and go. But if you were chasing a vibration issue with a car, that's something you could definitely do to try and cut down on comebacks or whatever the problem may be. So we'll go back to balance. I'm going to press start, and you'll see it's going to spin this wheel automatically. And I've got 1 ounce that's kind of weird. These are both lined up at the exact same spot, but 1 ounce is going to go on that inside bit. So I'm going to take 4 of these weights. And they're, sticky double-sided foam on here. So I'm going to take my arm here, and there's a little pull-out that I can hook that on there, peel that tape off, and then I'm going to slide this underneath, and then where this comes out and hits, as I move my arm in and out, you see on the top of that screen, it tells me exactly where to place it so that it's in the right spot. So this wants me to go, actually I'm going to press start again, to the inside one here. It wants me to go right there and then swing this out with the weights in there and then stick them right there in that spot. So I'm going to do that without holding the camera here. All right, so just place the weights, and I'm going to pop that off and kind of give that a push and a wiggle and make sure that those are actually staying put. Put this arm back into position. Close the hood, and you'll note this says check spin right now, so it's not going to do that road force test again. I'm going to press start. It's only going to spin the wheel up. All right, well, it still says 1/4 ounce. I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to do 2 ounces on the inside there and see if we can get this thing to zero out for us. So of course the air compressor kicked on as soon as I was sticking that down on there, but I put 2 ounces in there. I spun it up again because it was weird that it didn't give us the right measurements, and it told us 0 and then 2 1/4. I just put 2 ounces on there because sometimes you can squeak by. These machines round, so hopefully if we do 2 instead of 2 1/4, it's going to round down and give us that okay symbol. So I'll close that, press start, hopefully one last time, and see if this zeroes out for us. And there we go. So now we've got okay. We don't need any more weights on this thing. We're all green. We can open this up. I can stand on this pedal to lock it in place as I unscrew this. And remember I said at the beginning you can kind of cheat a little bit and double tap on that foot pedal. So I'm going to double tap again. And it knew the last time to screw it on, so this time it screws it off. So now I would pull this off, it can go back on the car, and I load up the next tire. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot me an email. Otherwise, be good, and I'll see you next time.